So I guess we're live. Maybe to confirm if you guys can hear me. Mic check.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
great. So welcome everyone to our webinar today. So my name is Rose. Tosin, maybe we can join me. Tosin? Okay. So, hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. My name is Rose Delilah Gesicho and I am Zindi Community Coordinator. So today we are really privileged to have winners of the GBV competition that happened a month ago, and we'll be having them share with us their solutions. So please stay put because this will be an amazing session. So before we get started, maybe I can just introduce the individuals who are here right now for the webinar, the people who will be taking us through the competition, and then I can just share a brief overview of Zindi, and then we can get started. So I'll just ask a few the people who have joined in to share who they are, and maybe who they are in the leaderboard so that you guys can also check on the back end, at least to get to be familiar which position they were, and then we'll hear more from them afterwards. So maybe you can introduce yourself, what you do currently, and then maybe a fun fact about you if you have any for now, and then we can just get started. So I'll start with Tim. Please unmute and introduce yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. So, hey everyone, I'm Tim. So, live in Johannesburg. I work for, maybe let's jump to the leaderboard stuff. So, came first in the competition. I had a web-based solution. So, it's a website that sort of incorporates a few models and other interactive components. And let's see, I work at a big data science company called Quantium. It's an Australian company which is branching out globally at the moment. So I've done sort of like small little stints both in Australia and now more recently in the UK, obviously based in South Africa. So everything I do is remote. Interesting fact about me, let's see, maybe one that's not too exposing. I play hockey. I've played softball in my past and gymnastics as well. So I've always sort of been sports mad, I guess. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that brief and insightful introduction, Tim. So you can go to Bisola.
My name is Bisola Lasende, and I stay in Nigeria, Akure to be precise. And my solution has to do with observing and exploring the indicators, especially those that relate to the database violence or other indicators by probably World Bank and the UN organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Bisola. We can go to Sahar.
Hello, my name is Sahar Ben Mabrouk. I'm junior computer vision data scientist at EU Vision. I'm recently graduated from the Faculty of Science of SPACS. Well, I'm from Tunisia. I'm a data science enthusiast, and my solution is detecting violence using computer vision.
Thank you, Sahar. I think we'll also get to hear from Tosin. Tosin, mic check. Okay, maybe as Tosin fixes their mic on the back end, I can share my screen with a short presentation before handing it over to our winners of the challenge. So just a moment. Okay, great. So I hope everyone can see my screen. Okay, so yes, welcome to the webinar once more. So this is Zindi Africa. We are a social enterprise that aims to, push for data scientists across Africa to build solutions for Africa, and we are hoping to build a talent of data scientists across Africa. So our main our main drive is just to build AI together with everyone across Africa and for Africa. So as mentioned, we are a social enterprise whose mission is to mobilize a community of data scientists across Africa to solve region's most pressing problems. So a quote that we can share with you guys currently is, the only way we are going to fix African problems is with African solutions. This was said by Lawrence Muthonga, and it's something we can put to heart because at the end of the day, we are currently in Africa and we are trying to have maybe solutions that will fit Africans by using data from Africa. So that's something we should keep in mind as much as we are trying to solve solutions. Let's put in mind where we're coming from and how the solutions are going to help our society. So just to share a brief about Zindi and what Zindi is about. So Zindi has over 30,000 plus data scientists currently registered on Zindi. So that means we have a really large community of people who are interested in data science. And we also have 45 African countries represented, and 25% of Zindi users are female. So we are also huge on inclusivity in the field of STEM. And that's why we really appreciate all those people who are bringing in diversity to our platform. So we have also launched 150 competitions and hackathons, and up to 2,000 data scientists competing in each hackathon. And having to think about Zindi being a source of income to some of our data scientists, we have $300,000 USD in prizes paid to data scientists. And last but not least, we have Umoja Hack, which is the largest Pan-Africa virtual hackathon with 1,000 plus students and 126 universities that happens annually. So stay tuned for Umoja Hack 2022 because it's going to be a huge one. So for today's session expectation, our requirements is to participate in the discussion by asking questions or giving feedback to our winners, and also use the chat section to interact with other attendees to just build and foster the community. So if you want to just share what you're learning from this amazing session, you can always go to social media and maybe do a hashtag on GBV or GBV webinar or tag Zindi Africa just to share what you're learning today. And for the topic of the day, we'll be covering the AFD Solutions for Gender-Based Violence Challenge. So the gender-based violence is a serious pandemic in Africa and globally. So the Zindi community was to create and uncover data sets that relate to gender-based violence in Africa. And the objective of this challenge is to use these data sets to create a solution that will help fight against GBV in Africa. So for today, we'll have the top winners, as mentioned, of the AFD GBV competition, taking us through the solutions they came up with. And this will be a very informative session. And be sure to take advantage of the learnings, take notes, and also ask questions where you need to. And finally, for the agenda of the day, we'll be having from 2 to 10, which is now I'm taking you through an introduction and welcoming you to the webinar. And from 2:10 to 2:30, we'll have a presentation from Busy Vinci. That's his ID on the leaderboard. So he'll just take us through his solution. And then from 2:30 to 2:50, we'll have presentation 2 by SPACT. And from 2:50 to 3:20 p.m., we'll have presentation from the Grace Mentees team. So each of these presentations will take 15 minutes, and then it'll just give room for 5 minutes that you can ask questions from each of the presentations. And then in general, if you have maybe a Q&A that you want to ask, we'll just have around 10 minutes for you to ask just in general, maybe their background or how they got started into data science and taking part in hackathons and how they won. So those are just the general questions you can ask on the chat also. So without further ado, now I'll just pass it to our first presenter, that's Busy Vinci, and he can take us through his presentation. So to you, Busy, yeah, Bisola.
Thank you very much. I'll start by sharing my screen now. I guess my screen is visible. Okay, yes. So What inspired the Firstly, my name is Bisola Sende, and I'm known as Bizibishi or the Zindi platform. And my solution is a dashboard. And what inspired the solution are what we call indicators. So while observing the data sets available to us, I discovered that most of them are actually indicators from different organizations such as World Health Organization, World Bank, UN, among others. So forecasting trends also of a variable. So in our own case, our variable is gender-based violence or violence against women. So we need a way to measure or to know how prevalent this matter is how um, or our current condition or our current position on these variables. So examples of indicators for GBV includes number of reported cases of violence, the rate of rape cases, percent of women who have been abused by their partner or whether previous or present partner in the previous 12 months. And then it can also be statistical methods too, such as violence against women percentage. So it might be basic indicators, some measures that are taken by survey, or it might even be a more complicated indicator such as statistical using statistics. So and there are I found two PDFs on indicators because there are a lot of challenges when it comes to coming up with a good indicator. How practical is it? How are the survey or the research going to be taken, and the ups and downsides of each indicator. So the two fantastic PDFs I saw was GMO from the Gender Monitoring Office in Rwanda, and this organization have been doing some fantastic job in gender-based violence against and violence against women. And Rwanda, and that fact about Rwanda is that it has a lot of women in their in a parliament, and the other organization is UN. In the PDF, it's actually like a meeting between different subsections of UN because UN have bodies in almost every continent and bodies for particular problems too, such as UNFPA that has to do with population funds. So when if you have indicators for the gender-based violence or violence against women, how can we reduce the negative ones and how can we improve the positive ones? Because most of these indicators, they are not things we can control. Them. It's hard to influence the indicators by directly. So the idea that came to me is by controlling some other correlated indicators. And then if you go through the data set, it's quite that a lot of them are from World Bank, UN, and some of them it's not just about violence or gender issues. Some of them have to do with economics, some of them have to do with education, among others, and health also. So the idea is that okay, if we can't control some of the major indicators or the primary indicators for gender-based violence, we can probably influence some other indicators such as the level of education, the kind of employment women participate in, and women participation in politics too. So, but the question that might come to our mind is that how do we know the exact indicators to work on or the projects we can carry out to improve some of these indicators? And that's the main idea and the purpose of the dashboard. So let me refresh the page so I can see. So I group the indicators into two. I put them into two folders. We have the input folders and the target folders. So the targets are our like our primary indicators, and then under this folder we also have files. So I aggregate the data to different files depending on the source. So example here is multi-source. There's also one that has to do with proportion of ever partner women that have been subject to violence by their partner or previous partner. And on the right hand side are the input files, and these are indicators that I think they are not exactly on gender-based value, but we might try to observe which ones are correlated with our target indicators. So from the file we have indicators, we can choose one, and then this one is kind of like an interesting one, and then we can try to observe the results. So there are two plot over here. On the left hand side is an heat map, and we can use it to observe our target indicator or the input indicator. As you can see, we have location Sudan. The input indicator is 30 and the target is 34. And one thing I noticed about this indicator is that most of them are not annually. Some of them for a country, let's say Nigeria, might have data for 2010, 2015, and then 2018. For another country, let's say Rwanda, we might have data for 2013 and 2020. So the data is sort of sparse. So that's why I had to aggregate the year to the latest year, to the most recent one. So the color presently depends on the input, so we can change the color from input to target by clicking on the radio button here, so that way we can the if we over the on the data, we'll still be able to see the input on the target values, but the color indicates either the target or the input, which can be selected with the radio button. And then on the right hand side is a scatter plot, which is actually where we observe the correlation. And a lot of times the correlation value is not so reliable. So that's why it's also important to have this plot, because sometimes you might have a high correlation, and then when we check the plot, we discover that there's very little data, or there are a lot of outliers and things that make noise in the data. So we can also look at other data, other folders, sorry, other file, and then observe other indicators. So, and then one of the primary indicators I found that is very correlated with violence against women percentage is the um, amount of women who believe husband is justified in beating their wives. So in some indicators, we have 5 reasons. It can be any of the reasons. It can be when she neglects the children. This is like um, the primary indicator that is very correlated with our primary indicator. So, and then we can observe other files, um, like just observe, okay, this is a three input data, might not find it interesting. So it's just a way to explore and explore. So, and like, these are not the only indicators we can have for now, but these are the ones that are available in the competition, and we can add more data or more data to explore. We can add more targets. We just have to put them into the target folder. And then if you want to observe some inputs, you can put them into the inputs folder too. And another thing is that we can also compare inputs to inputs, because we might find some input indicators that we find interesting and would like to explore it and check it with other inputs too. So that's why we can select the inputs in target folder or target file and explore things. And another last thing I would like to mention is that UNFPA has a data that I sort of find very interesting, though it's not something that can be downloaded, but we can view the dashboard. We can go to unfpa.org and then click on data here. So UNFPA has a lot of indicators, and they've done a lot of work, such as genital mutation and midwifery, and they have a lot of data on air too. Some of them have been downloaded and be included in the dashboard, but this geospatial is something I really find interesting. I just want um, people to take note of too, because apart from national levels, they also have sub-regions. So we can see the dashboard over here, and their indicator is intimate partner violence. That's their own indicator. That's what they call it. And the interesting thing about this indicator is that most of the indicators I've seen are not, they are very sparse data. They are not regularly updated, and some of them, there are several years that are not included, that are not available. But for this indicator, we can even check for subnational data too. For example, if we select a country, let's say Armenia or Angola, we can look at the subregions, such as the states or the province that has, and see their value. So it's something I just felt like sharing, and but there's no option to download the data right now. So, but it's a wonderful dashboard to explore. So that's all for now. Thank you, and I think I can start taking up questions. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. Maybe if there are any questions, they can be shared on screen. As maybe I ask mine, I'm really curious how you went about creating the dashboard. Did you use a specific tool, or how did you go about? Is it Streamlit or?
Yes, I use Plotly. Plotly is a nice library for visualization, and is the advantage to other libraries such as Matplotlib and Bookie is that you can embed it on websites or run it on the website because they have other. In fact, they have a JS framework too for websites. So, but I'm not very good with JavaScript, so I have to use Python, and Plotly was the main library I actually used for the dashboard. But for processing, it's I actually do that through the notebook. Sometimes I have to edit the file because of some are in Excel and they have like designs, etc. So, but that was for the aggregation.
Oh, nice. Thank you for that. So I've just received a question that I can ask you on. So what was your most surprising finding? So what did you find that was most surprising from your analysis and the most surprising correlation?
So while I was exploring some of those data, the most surprising one was that like the if I'm to assume, I actually assume that the women economy, or let me say their employment, or their level of power in the community will be the highest correlation, but it is correlated to an extent, but it's not as much as I had expected. And like I didn't expect it to be as much as, for example, the top most correlated was that of wife beating. Though I don't know how the violence percentage have been calculated. Maybe it is used as an input, but I think it's even from different sources. So it's something I really find surprising because I did not expect that women will be justifying their wife beating for any reason. So, and that's like the primary indicator. And to me, that was what brought the idea of like, okay, if there's anything that should be done, I think the number one priority would be like sensitization on the downsides of wife beating or the dangers that might occur, such as injuries and health issues too.
Hmm. Okay, that is really surprising also from my end. So maybe a question: Are these people who are justifying beating of women? Did you have maybe a column that had maybe if they're literate or they have education background? Is that a correlation?
Yes, and that thing I also noticed. Let me share my screen again. And that thing I also noticed a lot was the employment type of the community. So another thing is that what I study here are correlations. So I don't know what cause what. So for example, if you go back to the targets, and then one of the I discovered that the employment type of most of these women or the men affects a lot. For example, if the farming is the primary employment type, there's a greater chance of violence against women, whether it is the female employment or it is the male employment. And I don't know whether it has to do with education level in the country, but that was something I really find surprising too. I'm coming to see if I can. I'm trying to remember which file it is. I think that's the with economic. Okay, so one of the issues is that, for example, this has a high correlation, but there's not much data, so we may not want to justify the research, or we may have to look into more countries to add to the data.
Okay.
So there's sorry, I forgot which.
It's fine. You can always share with us
Okay,
maybe the insights afterwards when you're able
all right, no
to
problem.
get track of it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Bisola, for that presentation. So if anyone has questions, again, you can share via YouTube live chat, and then we can address them maybe after the session. So without further ado, I think I'll now pass it to the next presenter, who's packed our team to take us through his presentation. Yes.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, maybe first off, big thank you to Zindi and AFD for pulling this competition together. From a personal side, I think I learned quite a lot about gender-based violence in Africa and also just in the world in general. And I think similar to Bisola, I found sort of quite a few interesting insights, some of which shocked me and some of which I guess you just don't see and know until you actually get your hands on the data. So from that perspective, it was a really interesting competition for me. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and then start chatting through my solution. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect, cool. So my solution was a web-based sort of website, and the idea was to bring together quite a few elements. So I think over the years we've seen how like social media, Facebook, Twitter, all of these things can create social revolutions that sort of mobilize people to address issues. So I think we've seen sort of governments getting toppled, lots of those sort of things sprung to mind. So I thought one of the best ways firstly create a website, so using technology to accessible, not just to a select few who can work with data, but rather to an entire community and I guess by extension to the entire world. And then the next part was that I felt that social media and all those other types of tools have a big social element involved in them. And I felt that that social element is what sort of gives it power. So in terms of the website I've created, I've tried to pull together that social element through a blog process. So if you find insights through using the tools on the website and visualizations on the website, you're able to sort of take screenshots or make comments and sort of interact with the community. So all the examples that you'll see on the side are my own sort of insights that I saw throughout the process. Yeah, otherwise, I think it'll probably be best to just walk through some of the elements of the website so you can get a feel for the solution. So first off is that you can sort of log into the website so everyone can create a username. I've got mine sort of pre-set up, and then you can also go and view your profile. So this isn't a very interesting profile, obviously. I was just testing some things. And so it's the profile of Tim, and then you can see all the posts that I've created. So I made one called Improve Maps by Filling in Missing Data, and then I gave some information about it. And then there's obviously a tag that has my name, and then a screenshot which I was able to upload and then comment on that later. So I think before diving into too many things, first I'll also chat about how I created it. So I was using Python and Flask and Dash and Plotly, so pull them all together. So maybe worth going through what each of their roles is as well. So the Python part basically is the glue that brings it all together. So all of these things are Python-based tools. And then in terms of Flask, so it's a micro framework which allows creations of websites. So the reason what you see here is very much of a look and feel of sort of some common websites you might have seen is due to Flask and Dash. So then Dash is the front end part of the website, where Flask's more of the back end stuff that works with URLs and just making sure when you click on links they work. So Dash is a Python library which allows for interactive, basically interactive website components. So you'll get drop downs, you'll get stick in maps, and then it also helps you pull Plotly, which is interactive graphing, also into this web-based app. So it's quite a common set of tools that are used together. So the first homepage, just sort of an indication of what I did through the website, and I think what's a good sort of summary is just looking through the topics on the left-hand bar. So I won't go through all of it. There's quite a lot, but I think one of the I guess, big inspirations as well behind all of it was, I've recently read a book called Factfulness by an author called Hans Rosling. So he was a medical doctor who then went and worked for the UN. And I think if you've all seen the bubble chart with countries and the GDPs, especially GDPs over time, he sort of created those plots. So he was almost the father of these sort of macroeconomic statistics of countries across the world, and he used them to gain a better understanding. And I thought that to some extent this is an extension of that idea as well, by building a web-based tool so you can visualize not only data relating to World Bank statistics, but then also honing into more African-specific issues such as gender-based violence, etc. So first piece, or rather, let me go through all sections. So there's the global attitude towards gender-based violence. So this all relates to survey data where questions in the survey were asked, is their husband justified in beating or hitting his wife? If ... And I think Bisola mentioned quite a few of the interesting insights he saw there. So some examples would be if she burns the food, if she neglects the children, and other domestic issues such as that. I'll go deep into all of these sections in a bit. Then I've got a World Bank statistics section. So one of the things that I thought was interesting on the World Bank data is that there's hundreds of these macroeconomic variables. So relating to GDP, specific survey questions, it could be whether females can hold a visa or not, do they have the same rights as males in certain arrangements, whether it's marriage or in terms of how the law sees them in terms of opening businesses. And for me, it was a bit of information overload. So what I've tried to do in this section is create what I've called country clusters. And so I've created 3 country clusters, and this was using the k-means clustering algorithm. And essentially what I did was create clusters that describe countries based on their World Bank statistics. And the findings there were quite interesting in terms of the groupings of the countries that we see. They're highly correlated to geographic position. Then I've got an information hub. So we received lots of pieces of data. So we had laws that we received, we had publications, and then also I think a useful piece of information is always support contacts for GBV related issues. So on the law side, I felt that often you can look at other countries similar to yours in terms of economic and you might think that done or implemented in their country may be useful for yours. So in the law section, it focuses on translation of laws from one language to another language. On the publication side, I think for me, publications are often inaccessible due to just sort of the length of them. And so I sort of set up an algorithm to create summaries of all the different publications we did receive. Then female reproductive health, unfortunately, this section I wasn't able to sort of populate out, but this focused on female genital, FGM, female genital mutilation. And for me, that was probably one of the more shocking sort of data sets that we did receive. It was very interesting to see the prevalence in certain countries of FGM. And then lastly, tools and data. So we've received all this data, and as I said earlier, that part of the reason of putting together everything in a website was to make it accessible. So there's a data portal that pulls together all this data. And then the tools section is trying to make tools almost like open source or freely available to the community. And those tools could be sort of identification of GBV issues, whether it's classifying tweets as being sort of containing GBV issues such as rape or violence. And those are sort of the ideas that then the community can have access to data science tools without having to get their hands dirty in terms of building them themselves. So going up to the first section, every section has documentation and then the actual sort of workings of it. I'll skip the documentations for now. It's just sort of runs through how to work with everything. So on this, we've got 2 sets of filter bars, global filter and then comparison filter. So while going through the website, I didn't have the comparison filter at first, but I found that I was always wanting to compare males versus females opinions, or country A versus country B, or people with higher education versus lower levels of education. So that's why the sort of 2 filter bars are included, and they range from selecting questions. So the look and feel of this will be very similar to what you saw in Bisola's one as well. In terms of, you can select a question, you can select a country, and then you can sort of select sub-demographic groups. So male, female, genders, and then also splits based on education, employment, marital status, and residence. So that could be like rural versus urban, etc. And when you're controlling those filter bars, what gets populated is this map down here. So at the moment, if nothing's selected, it just takes the average of all the variables above. So what I thought would be interesting is if you select a question, let's say for at least one specific reason, and this is to the question where respondents were asked whether they agreed, is a husband justified in hitting or beating his wife if ... So let's select the same question for the comparison filter. And then one of the biggest and most interesting insights that Bisola also alluded to is that there's this massive difference of views between males and females, and also the females' almost acceptance of GBV, at least in the survey, was quite surprising. So select females, so females will be on the left, and the darker the color, the sort of higher the acceptability, if you want to call it that, of GBV is. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to put males, and it takes a couple of seconds to update. So what you see here is that high percentage finding it acceptable to hit or beat a wife for any specific reason at least. It's much higher on the left-hand graph, much darker, which indicates that on average, females find GBV more acceptable. I found that a bit shocking at first. I might have a sort of stab at why that could be the case. So I guess that because this is survey data, people are known to lie in surveys to sort of feel good about themselves, or I guess seem less bad to who's ever conducting the survey. So maybe females were more honest and males were sort of less honest and sort of disagreed with the statement, even if that was not the case, or it could be a genuine trend. And I think that in itself was really interesting for me. And likewise, you can do this with a whole bunch of other variables. And then the data that powers these graphs, it's often nice to get a high level view of what is happening, but I think as data scientists, we always like to get our hands on the data. So based on the filters above here, you get access to the data. And this is using sort of Plotly, or rather Dash's data table functionality for websites. And you can filter these, or sort them, and you can also filter them. I'm not sure if I activated the filters though for this page. So that's for the global data, so top set of filters, and that's for the comparison data. And probably worth noting at this stage, if you do go to Tools and Data and to Data Portal, you'll be able to access all of this data. And then the next step that I found is that lots of different demographic splits were missing, and some countries were also missing data. So let's maybe select education and higher education, and hopefully a few more gaps will form in the graph. So it does sometimes take a couple of seconds. Again, fortunately, there's only a few gaps. So one thing I was interested in doing was applying a machine learning model to firstly provide interpretability, but also fill in these gaps. So as an example, if Algeria didn't have statistics for education, using the UN and World Bank data on education, or rather on the country, I was able to predict what the sort of average response would be for these questions. And then that not only allowed me to sort of fill in all the gaps of the map, which you can see when I say use both actual and estimated data, but it also let me gain understanding through using the model to sort of see the patterns that did emerge. So you can see here previously, Congo Democratic Republic was not filled in, and now it is. And based on statistics, it looks like it's more likely to have high levels of gender-based violence. It's not necessarily the case, but based on macroeconomic variables, it would indicate that it's quite likely that GBV would be quite prevalent in DRC. And then talking about the model, there would be a next piece that dives into the model. So there's lots of documentation, which I will skip over, but I used chap values to understand what were important variables and what was their impact. So if you were a male or female, would you be more or less likely to find GBV acceptable? And then also compared the impact of different variables. So one of the probably the most interesting insight I was able to extract was that females with higher education, the fact that they have a higher education opposed to other levels of education, where other levels of education would be primary or secondary, etc. The fact that they have primary education pushes up, or rather pushes down the acceptability for gender-based violence. Perfect. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll quickly breeze over the blog. So got the blog. We saw some of those posts from Tim earlier, and if you wanted, you could click on his tag and it'll take you to his bio and all his posts. And that was one of, I think the first, is there, scroll down to the bottom by mistake there. But I think the filling in of missing data was a big thing for me, I think, in terms of the usability of the tool, and then also the stark difference between males and females. Going over to the World Bank data now. So for me, core thing here is the statistics, or rather the country clusters. So let me see if I can open up something where we can visualize the clusters. So you can either view statistics individually. So let's just use GDP as an example. A map will be generated based on GDP. It's not actually very interesting. So South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt are significantly higher than the rest of the continent. But if you turn it into cluster view, this is where it gets a bit more interesting. So it takes the average of the cluster. And let me find a slightly better variable. Because that one, it doesn't really show the pattern, which is interesting. So here, each cluster, and there's 3 clusters, are given a color based on the average of the human capital index for females on a scale of 0 to 1. So what you can see is that this cluster here, which is most North African countries, and what I found quite interesting, I think predominantly Muslim or Islam countries, and you can see that they score quite highly on the female capital index, and they are all part of one cluster. Then there's this other cluster in the yellow, which is more or less Central Africa, and then you've got the third cluster being Southern and Eastern Africa, and these are again grouped together based on their similarity. If you prefer to look at a graph, you could always switch to graph view, and there's sort of a view where you can look at it cluster by cluster, or as before, you could switch off the cluster view and it will give you the statistics by countries. You can see some of these countries, unfortunately, help you hone down on it. So let's say you wanted to select something from South Africa, so where I'm from, and you thought that the let's say Protection from Harassment Act was quite interesting. But if your main language isn't English, it's often quite difficult to then transfer this knowledge across. So the idea is to, again, make it more accessible. So now the South African language, but maybe let's use French. So then you could select your translation language, and after a couple of seconds, it will be translated into French for you. And then again, as with most sections, there's a blog post attached as well. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through the details of that. Further in the information hub, there's also a publications page. So idea is that I used a so something that summarize. And then we almost get an abstract for each one. So if you decide that this publication's abstract machine generated is interesting or relevant to something we're looking at, you can click on it and it would expand. And one of the reasons I did this is, as you can see, the data isn't well formatted. So I found it quite cumbersome to sort of extract benefit from it until I was able to get a high level view of what's the sort of key takeaways. And this one was quite, I think if it received the same attention as received in the last couple of years, make a significant impact. And then GBV hotlines or services that different countries have. So for South Africa, there's a specific GBV website which has different contact numbers, so you can contact on Skype, SMS, or via emergency lines. And then lastly, we've got the tools and data portal. So all the data sets that we were provided with, including the ones that I subsequently improved, for example, the machine learning model, I've provided in here. So if you're interested in World Bank statistics, you can select a certain data set, click on it, and then it'll download onto your computer. And I think that's probably all I have time for, but let's maybe head off to questions. Sorry if I ran over time there, but just go back.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for that presentation. Maybe we can see if there are any questions on the YouTube live chat. And even as we do, is there a way we can access that page, or is there a link we can use to access it?
Good question. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get it up and running on a live server. I think there's just too much going on at one stage, but it is possible, but it would require a bit of work. So at the moment, unfortunately, no, there isn't.
Okay. It would have been nice to read through it. I think we need to cultivate that culture as data scientists to document projects. That was really good. So maybe I can, yeah. Yeah, maybe I can ask some questions on, do you have plans to take this platform forward from what you have done currently? Are you looking forward to maybe putting it out there or just taking it forward?
Good question. Definitely, I think it's an option, and an exciting option at that. It is something that would be nice to work on, and obviously there's some time constraints and things like that in terms of getting it up and running fully, and maybe a few sort of, I'd call them engineering constraints in terms of my understanding of getting a live website up and running. But obviously with enough support, I do think it is possible.
Oh, nice. And can someone be able, from your platform, can someone be able to contribute more data to your platform, or any data sources like the World Bank have APIs where you can pull the data automatically?
So there's no automatic pulling of the data, but it's definitely set up so that it is quite modular. So if more data sets appear, especially in the data portal, it will be easy to slot it in. And as World Bank data gets updated, it would be easy to put it into a landing zone that then processes it. And then I guess we'll ultimately push it into the application. And that's sort of assuming that it's up and running live on a sort of daily basis.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And we also like the findings that you shared. Definitely would like to maybe hear more on the findings in general. Yeah, it was really good to hear. As much as we women are the ones who maybe in statistics, they're the ones who get hurt mostly with the GBV violence. They're the ones who say it's okay, like there's a reason for it. So, yeah, it's really good to hear from such findings.
Yeah, no, I think
I
that's
think we
definitely
can
an
always chat more
interesting
to
and
get to hear what's more you
counterintuitive one. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. So thank you so much, Tim, for your presentation. I think we'll just follow up with more questions afterwards. And Now I'll just pass it to Sahar and her team to take us through the last presentation. Thank you, team.
Pleasure. Cheers. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Hello again. I'm going to shut down my cam to preserve a good network, okay? Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, our solution is detection of violence. It is based on computer vision. It was elaborated by Grace Menti's team, our team name, which is composed of me, Sahar Ben Mabrouk, a junior computer vision data scientist, Tosin Akintibu, a data science student and enthusiast, Damaris Njibai, she is computer science engineer. So this presentation is composed of concept of the idea, steps of the project, solution explanation, and what can we add to the project, and then references. So the concept of the idea was created and elaborated during the Zindi mentorship program, in which we were gathered as mentees and thought of using computer vision to find solutions for gender-based violence. So thanks to the Zindi mentorship program, this idea has been born and turned into a realistic solution. The idea is oriented to gender-based violence. In fact, it's about building a model that detects the face of violent women and draw a bounding box around the hurted part. So we noticed that many women who are victims of gender-based violence tend to remain silent or hide the scars on their faces by makeup or so we thought of building an object detection model that can identify the hurt part on the face of the violence's victim. And this model should be capable of generating a bounding box around the hurted part. So we thought of constructing a data set for this model. And we made the labelization of the images with bounding boxes. Step 2, section 2, steps of the project. So our project was based on these steps. Data collection, data collection was the first part of this challenge, I think. Labeling, annotating the data, choosing the required model, making the training, and submitting the result. So the data collection was based on scraping the required images using this API, DuckDuckGo image scraper library, which was developed by Jude Creel. The resulted images were like this: unviolenced and violenced women. The resulted number of images were 328 images for train and 62 for test. And then we made the data annotation. We labelized the images with bounding boxes using the online annotation website, Make Sense AI. The exported annotations files are in the following format. It were with this format: class, the x-mean and y-mean, which is the infer point of the bounding boxes, the width and the height of the bounding boxes, the image name, and the width and the height of the images. So we made a annotation processing. The annotation should be converted in this format: the image ID followed by the x minus, x max, y minus, y max, and the class. So the final result after making the annotation was like this: 328 train, which is composed from 274 of violenced women and 187 of unviolenced women, and 62 images were preserved to the test set. So this is an example of the ground truth. We see here how the violence is labelized with the bounding boxes. The trace of the violence is labelized with bounding boxes, and the unviolenced facet is labelized with bounding boxes too. Then we came to step 3, which is solution explanation. So we choose the model, the object detection model that we used. It is a faster RCNN backboned with ResNet 50 and feature pyramid network. Faster RCNN, it's an accurate object detection model, the best version of the RCNN family. The RCNN family are the region-based convolutional network family that were developed by Ross Kirschek and his colleagues. He's a researcher in Facebook AI. Faster RCNN architecture is composed of 3 parts: the convolutional layer parts, which is composed of ResNet 50 and the feature pyramid network. The part 2 is the region proposal network, which is one of the characteristics of the faster RCNN, and the fully connected network layers for classes and bounding boxes prediction. We'll describe our model. So the part 1, the convolutional layer network, in this part contains feature extractors. The feature extractors are mainly ResNet 50 and feature pyramid network to generate the features map. So the feature pyramid network is one of the things that make the object detection model more accurate. The part 2 is the region proposal network, which generates region of interest. It takes as input the feature maps that is generated by the convolutional layer and generates the region of interests to the classifier and to the region of interest pooling. And then the part 3, the fully connected layers, is just a classifier, are composed of fully connected network to predict the bounding boxes and its classes. Then we move to the helpful tips that made a huge change and huge performance to our model. Our model was based on transfer learning. As we are using small data set, we use a pre-trained model to reduce the overfitting and to reduce the computations. So the faster RCNN was pre-trained on COCO dataset, the Microsoft Common Object in Context, and the backbone was pre-trained on the ImageNet dataset. So pre-trained models, which means that already have the weights in the architecture. And then we used another tips, which is reducing the model complexity. We use these tips when we have small data sets. This reduces the overfitting. So we train on one backbone layer, and the other layers are frozen to minimize the overfitting. We see here the code. It's based on the PyTorch. So our model is pre-trained, faster RCNN. The backbone is pre-trained. And the trainable backbone layer, we only pre-trained on one backbone layer. And we used learning rate scheduler and the data augmentation. We used the augmentation library. This is the results of our model. This is a predicted images, predicted bounding boxes on the hurted part on the face. So we see our model could recognize the hurted part on the face here, and we reached accuracy 48% accuracy using the intersection over union accuracy. This accuracy type is used for object detection. Then we move to the third section. What can we add to the project? So we thought of elaborating our idea. We can transform this project into violence detection based on pose estimation using the same model, but we should make it predict the key points to detect if a person is facing violence by estimating the pose and make victim aggressor classification. So we can use the same model, just we should change the annotation to make it predict violence using the pose estimation. And our references are mainly paper with code, a blog from Towards Data Science, and PyTorch tutorial. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sahar, for your presentation. That was a really good presentation. You've also answered the question that I had in mind. I wanted to ask maybe why you prefer to use, I wanted to ask which tool you used for modeling. Is it TensorFlow or PyTorch, which I've seen?
PyTorch.
Yeah, PyTorch. Why compared to TensorFlow did you prefer to use PyTorch?
In fact, the PyTorch model, the models in PyTorch are already coded. It's easy to use. You can see here, it's just in one command, I can bring the model and define the pre-trained backbone and all what I need to do. As you see here, in just one line, I can define if the model is pre-trained or not, what kind of backbone I can use. You can use other backbone like MobileNet or like RetinaNet. So we can precise if we can train on the whole layers of the backbone or not in just one line. In TensorFlow, this requires a lot of code.
Okay, that's really nice. Got to learn at least some of the pre-trained models in PyTorch. That's nice. Maybe another question is, how hard was it to find images of violenced women to train the model on?
So as we used this image scraper, it's based on search, by searching the images using some words, some keywords. So we put the keywords into the code, and the image scraper made the research, and we downloaded the resulted images automatically.
Oh, that's nice. And for most of the images, is it skewed towards maybe someone who's bitten the eye and then the eye swells, or is there like maybe other images of someone who has been grabbed by the arm to show violence or something like that?
So our annotation are just on the face. It is based on the face, not on the violence, not on the pose violence. It's just about the face.
Oh, okay.
we are annotating image just on the face. But if we transform the problem to key points estimation, we can estimate the violence based on pose estimation.
Okay, that's good. Maybe for my final question is on, so what are some ways you see using this application?
I thought of using this application on mobile phone or on police station to just determine which cases are priority to have. So this is how we thought.
Okay. Could it be used maybe in social media or security cameras also?
Yes, we can use it on social media. It can be implemented on social media to detect the violenced women from the image that were shared on social media.
Yeah, this is really a nice presentation, and it would really be good, especially when one wants to, be able to decipher this kind of challenges across different countries. Or this, yeah. So
Yes,
it's really nice. Yeah.
actually, our idea was to use computer vision. Computer vision is the required tool or the more countable tool to use it to solve a problem in real world. So we thought of solutions that can be used in real world, not only back in that time when we were in the mentorship program. Most of the other groups focused on tweet classification. That's good for the social media, but in real world, we were thinking how to detect violence in real world and to find a solution related to AI and to image processing. So the most countable tool was a solution based on computer vision and object detection.
Yes. Yeah, I second that. That's really good. Yeah, thank you so much, Sahar, for sharing. I think now we are in the session where we have just general questions to ask our panelists. So that was a really good presentation, and I believe you guys have learned a lot of new concepts from your presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank
So I
you.
think, yeah, thank you. I think we're in the general session of just asking questions, and maybe just a question to maybe Tim and Bisola. I don't know if Tim is around. Okay, we can just ask Bisola. Oh, yes, he's around. So my question was majorly on the missing values that were in your data. Maybe how did you go about maybe working around them? Did you do imputation or?
So for thanks for most of the missing data, there's no way I didn't input them, and but what I did is most of the data that were provided as a quite a nice range for years. For example, some are from like 2000s or let's say 2005 or 2008 up to 2020. But nonetheless, there are some years that are missing, and for those, I just left them that way. But for countries that are available, even if it's several years back, maybe 2010 or 2012, I fit the most recent year to the table. And most of those data I also put the year at which we got the indicator there. But for absent data, I just left it that way because I don't really know how. I just let it that way. I think that was the best thing to do then.
Okay. Uh, that's also good, Bisola. Nice to hear about how you went about that. And maybe Tim, you can share how you went about yours.
Was the question regarding filling in missing values?
Yes.
Perfect. So a similar approach to Bisola on the data set, which was temporal. So I took the most recent year. But then also a big part of my solution was trying to fill in those missing gaps. So for countries that didn't have data, or for countries that didn't have data for survey questions, I actually built a light GBA model to impute those values. And the benefit, I think, of that is that lots of macroeconomic variables are related. So at the end of the day, I was able to fill in quite a lot of all of the survey data, so that we had splits for all genders, for all education groups and all residence groups, etc., and for all questions. In terms of where there was missing data, I chose to not, or completely for countries. For example, if I was wanting to use GDP to try predict and impute the missing values in the survey data, if one country didn't have GDP at all, then what I did is I excluded that from the model process because I didn't want to introduce bias there. And then if summarizing statistics while giving averages for this country clusters, if there was 10 clusters, but only 8 of them had that statistic, then they're just excluded from the average of that analysis. So depending on the use case, the method varied for how dealt with nulls.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, for sharing that. So I think we can wrap up our session for today. That was really good. I enjoyed your presentations. They're very insightful, and they just show us how much we still have a lot to do in the field of data science, and just a lot of solutions to implement in order to solve some of these challenges that we are having. So thank you guys for again sharing that with us. So maybe we can get to you guys. You can share with us maybe your social media handles or LinkedIn, so that we can always reach out to you guys maybe for further questions, and just so that you can keep the connection with you guys. So maybe you can share that with us briefly, and then you can wrap up the call. Maybe
It was
Sahar.
nice to know you all, and your work was impressive, Mr. Tim and Mr. Bisola. Congratulations, and I want to thank the Zindi team for their efforts during the mentorship program and for all the competitions that you make us possible to participate in it. I'm really learning from Zindi by participating in the competitions, and really it's helping me a lot. I'm learning by practice, and Zindi has an important role in my career as data scientist to be mature in the field and to know new things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar. Maybe you can share your LinkedIn so that we can also reach out to you in case maybe someone has a question on your presentation, they can find you. Or maybe you can also share via email, and then we'll share with the participants. Maybe Tim, any last words from your end?
I think similar sentiments to Sahar, is that was a really good competition. I think I've learned a lot, and not from a technical perspective, but more from like a broader African perspective, which I really enjoyed. And also wanting to congratulate all the other contestants. The solutions were really interesting, and it was good to be involved in the competition.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And Bisola, finally.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful project, and it's really opened my eyes to a number of issues that prevalent in the world. And thanks to Zidi also, because that's also where I had my first competition, and it has been very, very helpful too. And thanks to everyone.
Yes, thank you, Bisola. And great. I think that's the end of our session for today. I hope everyone learned a lot. And again, we'll also reach out with maybe their social media handles or emails, just in case you have a question to ask them, or just congratulate them and give them feedback. So thank you guys for joining, and we really appreciate you for also showing us the solutions that you had towards this problem. So I think we can wrap up and wish everyone a good afternoon. Yes. Thank you.
Goodbye.